My name is Marissa Thompson. I'm 32 and I work as a marketing specialist in Seattle. I share a small but cozy apartment with my husband, Ryan, 34, a software engineer who thrives on logic and structure. We've been married for 3 years, and up until recently, life felt steady, predictable in a way I had grown to appreciate. That sense of balance shifted the moment an invitation arrived: my parents' 20th wedding anniversary celebration. On the surface, it should have been something joyful, a chance to honor the people who raised me. But the thought of attending filled me with unease. It wasn't my parents I dreaded, it was my younger sister, Chloe. She's 30, floats from one gig to another without stability, and somehow always lands back under our parents' roof. Where I see responsibility, she sees comfort. And where I crave peace, she manages to stir constant irritation. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The strained bond from childhood. Chloe and I were never close, despite being only 2 years apart. Our mother, Linda, now 58, a retired military officer, raised us with a discipline that was more like a boot camp than a family home. Her philosophy was simple: life was competition, and only the stronger one deserved recognition. From racing each other to catch the school bus to fighting over who would finish the chores faster, everything in our household was a contest. As a child, I accepted it as normal, even healthy. Winning meant approval, and approval felt like love. But for Chloe, it was a suffocating weight. I excelled at school, thrived under structure, and my report cards always came back decorated with praise. That earned me the spotlight, especially from our mother. She would beam with pride when I brought home another certificate or academic award, her voice sharp with satisfaction as she told relatives how Marissa never disappoints. But every word of praise directed at me seemed to deepen Chloe's misery. She didn't care for textbooks or equations. She wanted to be outside, painting in sketch pads, chasing wild ideas, and daydreaming about places she had never been. To our mother, that was weakness. When Chloe failed to meet expectations, the punishments were harsh. Sometimes she went to bed without dinner. Other times she was forced to stand in the corner for hours, silent tears sliding down her cheeks while our mother's cold eyes bore into her. The most cutting moments were the comparisons. "Why can't you be more like your sister, Marissa?" My name became a whip, lashed at Chloe again and again. I tried to help. I remember evenings spent at the dining table, patiently going over her homework, whispering encouragement when I saw her frustration rising. But my efforts always backfired. The harder I tried, the more our mother hovered, reminding Chloe of her inadequacy. Instead of helping, I became another standard she could never live up to. I pitted her. I still do. Yet every time I spoke up in her defense, my mother turned on me. "Don't undermine me, Marissa. She needs discipline, not pity." Those words silenced me, left me complicit in her suffering. And perhaps in Chloe's eyes, it made me just another part of her cage. Tension reached its breaking point when Chloe was 16. One night, after yet another shouting match about grades, she swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. The memory of that night still makes my chest tighten. I can picture the chaos, the panic in my father's voice as he called an ambulance, the pale stillness of Chloe's face under the harsh hospital lights. By some miracle, she survived. That incident was a brutal wake-up call for my parents, especially for my mother. For the first time, she realized that her iron-fisted approach could break, not build, her child. They started family therapy, softened their tone, and became gentler with Chloe. But in their guilt, they swung too far in the opposite direction. Fear of losing her again turned into indulgence. Chloe never went to college. She drifted through odd jobs, none lasting more than a few months. Responsibility slipped through her fingers, but there was always a cushion: our parents' house in Portland, their money, their unwavering attention. She spent nights at parties, days nursing hangovers, and whenever confronted, she had an unspoken weapon: their terror that she might spiral again. It was as if her survival had become a bargaining chip. She learned, consciously or not, that hinting at fragility kept them captive. And while I built a life through structure and discipline, Chloe thrived in chaos, comfortably anchored by the very parents who once crushed her. Our bond, already fragile, hardened into something unspoken: resentment on her side, guilt on mine. And beneath it all, a silence that neither of us seemed willing to break. My husband and Chloe's unacceptable behavior. Ryan knows everything about my family's history. I never wanted to hide the truth from him: the pressure, the favoritism, the way Chloe learned to bend our parents' guilt to her advantage. He listened without judgment, but over time he formed his own impressions. And one thing was clear: Ryan couldn't stand Chloe. It wasn't just her lack of responsibility or the way she coasted through life. What disturbed him most were her inappropriate advances toward him, advances that began almost the moment they met. Chloe had a way of turning every interaction into something charged, whether it was brushing her hand against his arm and laughing too loudly, or sending late-night text messages filled with playful but suggestive undertones. First, Ryan thought he was imagining it, that maybe Chloe was simply being overly friendly. But as the pattern continued, there was no mistaking her intent. I confronted her more than once. I remember the tension in my voice as I told her she was crossing boundaries, that she needed to respect my marriage. Chloe just tilted her head, smirked, and said I was too sensitive. "It's just harmless fun," she would insist. "Don't be so uptight, Marissa." That dismissive response left me furious, but even more wounded was Ryan. He hated being pulled into Chloe's games, hated the way it placed strain between us. What made it unbearable was my parents' reaction. Linda, my mother, and Tom, my father, a 60-year-old retired banker, never treated Chloe's behavior as a problem. They brushed it off as childish affection, as if she were still the little girl who needed to cling to attention. They even made jokes about it, laughing in ways that cut me to the bone. I'll never forget the first time Ryan met my parents. We were sitting at the dinner table, conversation flowing awkwardly as it often does when new family members meet. Chloe, predictably, monopolized the evening, leaning into Ryan's side of the table, laughing at every word he said. At one point, my mother leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "Ryan," she said, "you're so funny. Honestly, you and Chloe are more alike than you and Marissa. You two share the same sense of humor." My father chuckled and added, "She's lively, just like you. Maybe she's the better match." Ryan froze, his smile faltering, but he forced a polite laugh. I did too, though inside I was burning. Comments didn't stop there. They came again and again, sometimes slipped into casual conversation, other times dressed up as light-hearted teasing. The worst moment came just before my wedding. As I was busy with last-minute details, my mother pulled Ryan aside. Later, he told me exactly what she had asked. "Are you sure you want to marry Marissa?" The implication was unmistakable. My mother was practically suggesting that Chloe was the better choice. When Ryan told me, I was devastated. I confronted my parents in a rage I didn't know I had. The fight was loud, ugly, and final. For months, I cut off all contact. Eventually, they apologized, claiming they had only been joking, that I was overreacting. But apologies without change mean nothing. Because even after their so-called regret, the same patterns continued. Birthdays or holidays, they would push Ryan to stand next to Chloe for photos, nudging and teasing while I stood by, humiliated. It was unbearable, a reminder that in their eyes, my boundaries never mattered. After a while, Ryan and I agreed on one thing: it was better to stay away. Avoiding family gatherings became our survival strategy. It was the only way to preserve our peace and our marriage. The decision to attend the anniversary. When my mother called to invite us to the 20th wedding anniversary celebration, I froze. Her voice was bright and expectant, like she assumed of course we would come. But in my chest, anxiety stirred. Ryan and I had avoided family gatherings for years precisely because of Chloe and my parents' refusal to draw any boundaries. I relayed the invitation to Ryan that evening over dinner. He was quiet at first, tapping his fork against the plate the way he does when he's deep in thought. Then he shook his head. "I don't see the point in putting ourselves through it again, Marissa. You know how it goes. Chloe will hover, your parents will egg her on, and we'll come home furious." I agreed with him. I wanted to decline. Yet something gnawed at me, an unease but also a longing. Maybe part of me still wanted a shred of normalcy with my family, a chance to celebrate something without feeling cornered. Ryan surprised me. After a moment he leaned back and said, "Maybe we should go." I blinked at him. "Go? Why?" "Because avoidance doesn't solve anything," he said steadily. "Every time we skip these events, your parents and Chloe keep living in their little bubble, pretending nothing's wrong. Maybe it's time we face them head-on. If they cross the line again, we won't stay silent. Let everyone see the truth for what it is." His words sent a chill through me. The thought of open confrontation terrified me, but there was something liberating about it too. I nodded slowly. "So we go. And if they push, we push back." Ryan's eyes met mine. "Exactly." The evening of the celebration arrived with a crisp Seattle chill in the air. We drove to the banquet hall my parents had rented in Portland, a familiar place where extended family had gathered for graduations and anniversaries in the past. I kept my hands tight on the steering wheel, my pulse thrumming. Ryan's presence beside me steadied me. Inside, the hall shimmered with warm lighting and carefully arranged flowers. A string quartet played softly in the corner. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like this could be one of those nights where family came together without tension. My mother greeted us at the door. She hugged me, her perfume strong and familiar, and said, "I'm so glad you came, Marissa. It means a lot." I tried to believe her. The first hour passed without incident. We mingled with relatives, sipped wine, and made polite small talk. Ryan stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing mine in quiet reassurance. Then came dinner. Plates were being passed around, laughter rising and falling at the long family table. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, was sitting across from us. She had always been the type to poke fun, but I never saw malice in her. At one point she chuckled and said, "So, Chloe's still single, huh? Don't tell me you've got your eye on someone tonight." It was a harmless enough tease until my mother jumped in. "Oh, Chloe doesn't have a boyfriend," she said loudly, grinning as she pointed across the table. "But she's crazy about her brother-in-law." The room erupted with laughter. My father slapped the table, joining in. "That's true," he said. "We've always said Ryan and Chloe make a better match. They just get each other." Chloe stood there, cheeks red, but she didn't deny it. If anything, she looked pleased by the attention, basking in it. She laughed nervously, but not once did she say, "That's inappropriate," or "Stop." Aunt Susan turned to Ryan and teased, "So, Ryan, do you have any cousins to introduce to Chloe? Someone who could handle her energy?" The blood in my veins boiled. But this time I was ready. I pushed my chair back, the scrape echoing through the sudden quiet. My voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. "Mom, how dare you? You promised to respect our boundaries. And yet here we are, my marriage, my husband, turned into the punchline of your jokes." The laughter died instantly. Eyes darted around the table. "Do you all hear yourselves?" I demanded, scanning the faces of my family. "You think it's funny that my sister has been making advances on my husband for years? Late-night texts, inappropriate touching, constant flirting. Ryan told me how uncomfortable it made him. And you all laugh? Chloe's smile faded, her face draining of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I turned to her directly. You've acted like a creep, Chloe. And you hide behind the excuse that it's just a joke. Well, it's not funny. It's humiliating. Do you realize what you're doing to me? To us? Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. Then I faced my parents. And you too, you've been encouraging it. Do you remember, Dad, how many times you said Ryan and Chloe are better suited? Do you remember, Mom, pulling Ryan aside before our wedding and asking if he was sure about marrying me? Do you realize how disgusting that is? On my wedding day? The silence at the table was suffocating. I turned to Aunt Susan. Tell me, Susan, if your daughter flirted with someone's husband, would you sit back and laugh? Or would you shut it down? Because my parents never did. My father's face turned crimson. That's enough, Marissa, he snapped. This is not the time. But before he could continue, Ryan spoke. His voice was calm, but his words landed like grenades. If everything's just a joke, he said, then maybe Linda's affair with the neighbor 10 years ago was just a joke too. Right? The air was sucked out of the room. Forks clattered onto plates. Eyes widened. I heard a collective gasp ripple across the table. My stomach dropped. That secret I had told Ryan in confidence. My mother's desperate begging, my father's reluctant forgiveness, it had been the darkest chapter of our family. My mother's face turned ghostly white. Ryan! She shrieked. How dare you bring that up? That's none of your business. My father slammed his hand on the table. You are out of line. You don't speak to us that way. But Ryan didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his voice steady. Why not? You've been making me the subject of your so-called jokes for years. You normalize Chloe's behavior by laughing at it. You diminish your daughter's marriage for your own amusement. So tell me, why is that acceptable but bringing up your past isn't? My mother shook her head violently, her voice rising. That was different. That was private. I cut in, my voice trembling with fury. No, Mom. You and Dad crossed the line a long time ago when you treated my husband like a toy in Chloe's games. You turned your guilt into indulgence and called it love. But it's not love, it's enabling. Chloe is not a child anymore. She's a 30-year-old woman who knows exactly what she's doing. Chloe finally snapped, her voice shrill. Stop making me the villain, Marissa. You're ruining this night. You always think you're better than me. I shot back without hesitation. You let Mom call my husband your crush and you said nothing. You let them compare him to you for years. And you still want me to believe you're innocent? What do you want, Chloe? Do you actually want Ryan? Gasps rose again. Chloe's mouth fell open, but no words came out. That was it. Ryan pushed his chair back and stood. We're done here, he said firmly. He took my hand and together we walked out. The murmurs behind us followed like echoes. Some relatives avoided my eyes, pretending to be busy with their plates. Others looked stunned. Later that night, my phone buzzed with messages. Aunt Susan apologized, saying she should have spoken up. A few cousins admitted they had seen the tension for years but never knew how to address it. For me, the overriding feeling wasn't regret, it was relief. For once, I had spoken every truth out loud. No more silence, and no more pretending. As Ryan drove us home, his hand steady on mine, I breathed easier than I had in years. Cost of honesty was high, but the weight that lifted from my chest was priceless. Consequences and new developments. 6 months later, the ripple effects of that night had grown into waves that none of us could ignore. What began as whispers, arguments, and hidden letters had escalated into a full-blown crisis that shook every corner of my family. Chloe had not stopped. Despite warnings from the court, from my father, and even from Ryan himself, she continued to send letters, long, obsessive declarations written in a shaky hand, drenched in desperation. They arrived weekly, sometimes twice a week, folded neatly into envelopes that smelled faintly of her perfume. First, I tore them apart before Ryan could even see them. But eventually, I realized he needed to see the truth for himself, that this wasn't just a phase Chloe would outgrow. It was a fixation, a refusal to let go of something that had never truly belonged to her. When we announced on social media that I was pregnant, it should have been one of the happiest milestones of our lives. Comments poured in, friends congratulating us, distant relatives offering blessings, Ryan's co-workers promising to bring us meals once the baby arrived. For a brief moment, I thought maybe our family's shadows had finally loosened their grip. But then Chloe showed up. It was late afternoon when I saw her standing outside the house. She was dressed in a pale blue dress, her hair disheveled, clutching something in her hand that looked like a photo frame. She wasn't ringing the bell. She wasn't even moving. She just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the door as though sheer willpower could force Ryan to open it. Ryan returned from work minutes later, his car pulling into the driveway. The instant he saw her, his face drained of color. He didn't even roll down the window. He reversed, sped off, and parked 2 streets away before calling the police. That night was the turning point. Officers arrived, handcuffed Chloe as she wept and screamed Ryan's name, and drove her away. Because she had violated the restraining order and had a documented history of harassment, the judge this time had no leniency left to give. Chloe was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, followed by mandatory psychological therapy. For most families, that might have brought relief. For us, it only deepened the fractures. The legal fees alone were staggering. My parents, who had already spent thousands defending Chloe during her earlier incidents, now faced costs they could no longer shoulder. My father drained his savings, sold stocks, and borrowed against his retirement account just to cover the lawyers. The weight of it showed in the slump of his shoulders, in the way he stared blankly at the bills spread across the kitchen table. But it wasn't just money. It was shame. The town knew. Everyone knew. Small communities have long memories and sharp tongues, and once the news spread on Facebook and local gossip circles, it was impossible to contain. People no longer waved when they saw my parents at the grocery store. Invitations stopped arriving. Family members, cousins, aunts, even old friends suddenly had other plans and stopped returning calls. Then came the final blow. My father filed for divorce. He told me one evening, his voice hollow but firm, "I can't carry this anymore," he said. "Your mother's choices, Chloe's behavior, it's poisoned everything. I've tried to keep this family together, but at what cost? I've lost my dignity, my peace, my future." By then, I think he had already emotionally detached. Within weeks, he packed his belongings and moved to California. He said he needed a fresh start, somewhere far from the scandal, somewhere people didn't know the intimate details of his collapse. My mother stayed with Chloe, as she always did. They rented a small, shabby apartment in a neighboring town because Chloe, under court order, couldn't leave the state. Their lives shrank. Landlords hesitated to rent to them once they Googled Chloe's name. Employers grew cold the moment background checks revealed her criminal record. My mother, once so proud and socially active, now avoided eye contact in public, shoulders hunched, as though carrying not just her own shame but Chloe's as well. And us? Ryan and I moved forward. Our son, Liam, was born in the middle of spring, a tiny miracle swaddled in hospital blankets, his small cries filling a space in my heart I didn't even know had been empty. Ryan held him with tears streaming down his face, whispering promises of protection, of love, of stability. In that moment, I knew that no matter how messy our family history was, we were building something stronger, cleaner, and healthier for the next generation. Our home became filled with the soft chaos of new parenthood, sleepless nights, endless diapers, the quiet awe of watching Liam's chest rise and fall as he slept. Even with the exhaustion, there was joy. Ryan and I grew closer, united by the responsibility of raising a child, bound together by the trials we had endured and the triumph of surviving them. Still, Chloe lingered in the background like a storm cloud beyond the horizon. She was behind bars now, but her absence wasn't permanent. 6 months would pass, therapy would begin, and eventually she would be out again. The restraining order was still active, her criminal record now a wall between us and her, but I knew better than to think obsession disappears easily. Yet strangely, I didn't live in fear. I had seen what facing the truth could do. The night at that party, when everything came crashing down, had been the most painful night of my life. But it had also been necessary. Like ripping off a bandage that had grown too tight, exposing the wound beneath, it forced healing to begin. My family had cracked open, its ugliest truths spilling into the light. And though the aftermath was brutal, divorce, financial ruin, public disgrace, it was also clarifying. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't ignoring letters, covering up secrets, or smoothing over tensions. The world knew. Everyone knew. And from that honesty, painful as it was, came a strange sense of freedom. Looking back, I don't regret confronting Chloe. I don't regret speaking the truth that night, no matter how much it shattered my family. If anything, it was the only way to end the cycle of denial and enable something better to grow in its place. Now, as I watch Liam sleep, his tiny fingers curled around mine, I realize that my story is no longer about Chloe or my mother or the shame of the past. It's about this child. It's about Ryan and me choosing every day to build a life defined not by fear or obsession but by love and resilience. Chloe may always remain a shadow in the background. But shadows can't survive long when faced with light. And we finally had found ours. 5 lessons I learned from my story. When I look back at everything that happened, the letters, the public scandal, the divorce, the shame, the sleepless nights, and finally the birth of my son, I realize that my story isn't just about pain. It's about lessons carved into my life through fire, lessons that I now want to share with you. If my experience can spare even one person from the confusion and fear I once carried, then maybe all of this had a greater purpose. Lesson 1. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are protection. For so long, I confused setting boundaries with being unkind. I thought if I tolerated Chloe's behavior, if I kept quiet and endured, it would eventually resolve itself. But silence only fed her obsession, and my hesitation allowed it to grow. I learned that saying no, drawing a clear line, and enforcing consequences are not acts of cruelty. They are acts of survival. Boundaries protect not just you, but the relationships you value. If I had understood this earlier, maybe the storm would have come sooner, but it also would have passed sooner. Lesson 2. Secrets rot families from the inside. My mother's choices, Chloe's behavior, my own attempts to cover up what was happening, all of it fermented into a toxic brew that eventually exploded. Secrets may feel like protection, but in reality, they are poison. They corrode trust, respect, and love. The night I confronted Chloe at the party was the night I stopped protecting lies. It hurt everyone, but it was the only path toward healing. If you're hiding truths to keep the peace, remember this: peace built on lies is no peace at all. Lesson 3. Shame loses its power when faced with honesty. The hardest part of our journey was not Chloe's letters or even her arrest, it was the public shame. Everyone knew. Everyone whispered. And yet, once the truth was exposed, I felt lighter. It was as if shame had been stripped of its power because it no longer lived in the dark. I learned that honesty, even when painful, is strangely liberating. You can survive people's judgment. You can survive gossip. But you cannot thrive while constantly pretending. Lesson 4. Healing sometimes requires walking away. My father's decision to divorce my mother shattered me at first. For years, he had been the glue holding everything together. But in the end, I realized his leaving was also an act of healing. He chose peace over chaos, dignity over endless sacrifice. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people you love when staying means losing yourself. That choice doesn't mean failure, it can mean freedom. Lesson 5. Out of brokenness, new life can grow. The greatest paradox of my story is this: even as my family fell apart, my own little family blossomed. Ryan and I brought our son Liam into a world full of broken pieces, but his arrival gave those pieces new meaning. Out of betrayal came loyalty. Out of shame came resilience. Out of heartbreak came joy. Taught me that life is not about avoiding pain, it's about finding what can bloom after it. Today, I hold my son in my arms and I realize Chloe may always be a shadow in our story, but she doesn't define it. My mother's mistakes and my father's heartbreak don't define it either. What defines us is the choice to love, to stand firm, to protect what is worth protecting, and to let go of what is beyond saving. If you've been through something similar, if your family has fractured, if you've endured shame, if you've faced someone's obsession or betrayal, please know this: you are not alone and your story can still bloom into something beautiful. And if this story spoke to you, if you found even one lesson that resonates, I'd be grateful if you like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep building this community of resilience together. Your support helps turn pain into purpose, one story at a time.